Nobody who lives here needed a video to tell them Florida is filling up. You can see it from your own car. So why does almost every explanation of it get the important word wrong? Here is the latter. In 1950, this state had fewer people in it than Kentucky did. By the year 2000, there were about 16 million of us. 20 years later, 21 million. And now, 5 years after that, we are closing in on 24 million, which puts Florida third for population nationally, behind only California and Texas. But the number is not the story. My name is Roy Baker. I sell real estate in Florida, and the most useful thing anybody has said about this was not said by an expert. It was left in a comment section by a viewer, and it has more agreement under it than the video it was correcting. The video argued that Florida is turning into one giant city. The top comment, with thousands of people agreeing, said no, it is not. It is turning into one giant suburb. That correction sounds like a quibble, and it is not. It is the whole thing, and if you own a house in this state, it is the difference between your property being worth more in 10 years and your property being surrounded. Before I go further, tell me in the comments what county you are in and how long you have been there. That is all. I ask because this channel is full of people who have watched a specific piece of ground change, and every time I do one of these, the best information ends up underneath the video rather than inside it. So let me explain the difference, because it decides everything that follows. A city grows up. It gets denser, it builds transit, the value concentrates around a center, and being near that center is what you are paying for. A suburb grows out. It adds rooftops at low density across more and more land. Every one of those rooftops needs a road and a pipe and a school seat, and nothing concentrates anywhere. We are not the only state that has done this. Arizona built Phoenix outward across the desert the same way, and the complaint you hear from people who have been in Arizona 30 years is word for word the complaint you hear here. The difference is that Arizona ran into a wall made of water, and everybody could see the wall. Ours is harder to see, and I will come back to that. Florida is doing the second one at a scale that is hard to picture. Somewhere around 9 in 10 Floridians now live in what the census calls an urbanized area, which is about as high as that figure gets anywhere in America, and yet almost none of us live anywhere you would call a city. Cape Coral is the clearest example in the state. It is enormous, it has grown about as fast as anywhere in America, and it does not really have a downtown at all. Now 3 things that does to the house you already own. This is the part the urban planning videos do not cover, because they are not talking to owners. The first is carrying cost, and it is the one people feel first. Every new rooftop is a demand on services that somebody has to fund. The road gets widened, the school gets built, the fire district expands, the sheriff hires, and the way that gets paid for in this state is through the value of your property, because Florida has no state income tax, so the money comes off what you own, rather than what you earn. Here is the number that makes it concrete. Across Florida, property tax collections went from just under $34 billion in 2019 to just over $55 billion in 2024. That is a rise of about 62% in 5 years. And the largest single reason is not that anybody went on a spending spree. It is that the assessed value of the houses went up, because the state median went from around $330,000 in 2020 to somewhere near $425,000 now. That is what growth does to a bill. Your neighbors arriving is not a neutral event for your escrow statement. And the tax line is not even the half of it, because there is a second number on that statement that has been moving faster. A typical Florida homeowner's insurance policy now runs somewhere in the range of $4,200 to $5,700 a year. And for a lot of you, that is no longer the smaller of the two numbers. It is the reason people who own their houses outright with no mortgage at all still write a check every month to keep them. Now, sprawl does not cause a hurricane, but it does decide how many structures are standing in the path of one, and how much of the water that used to soak into ground is now running off a roof and a driveway and a road into somebody's living room. When people from New York or Illinois look at a listing here and see a low price, the price is the smallest part of what they are agreeing to. The second thing is the one that actually hurts, and I want to give it to you in the words of the people who lived it rather than mine. A man wrote that his family home used to be in the sticks, that they could ride four-wheelers through the woods behind it, and that inside 10 years they were completely surrounded by housing complexes with no woods left anywhere near them. Another wrote that his once small town became a massive suburban area of identical black and white painted houses with the trees taken out. That comment has over 1,000 people agreeing with it. Those are not complaints about property values. Those are people describing losing the specific thing they bought the house for. And that matters commercially as well as emotionally, because a great many of you moved to this state for a version of it that is being paved, and the people arriving next are buying the paved version and do not know the difference. The third thing is the exit, and it is the one almost nobody prices in. There is a comment I keep thinking about from a resident in Central Florida, and it has hundreds of people agreeing. It says the sprawl is distressing to watch and that they are starting to think about leaving. Another, from a couple in semi-rural Marion County, between Ocala and the Villages, describes furious construction where there was nothing in 2009, bumper-to-bumper traffic outside of rush hour, and ends with the words "time to move." Think about what that means at scale. If enough people who already own here decide that the thing they came for is gone, they list. And they all list into the same market, at the same time, in the same handful of counties. That is a supply event that has nothing to do with interest rates and nothing to do with hurricanes. And it is not in anybody's forecast. Now let me stop and hand you an actual decision, because this is where these videos usually stay vague. Imagine you own a house on the edge of one of these counties. You have been there 15 years. Behind you is a tract of trees, and it is not yours, and last month the county approved 400 homes on it. Nothing about your house has changed. Your view has, your commute is about to, and your assessed value is probably going up rather than down, because all those new rooftops sell for more than you paid. So do you sell now, while the trees are still in the photographs, or do you stay? There is a real argument on both sides. Selling now means you capture a view that will not exist in 3 years, and you buy somewhere the same thing has not started. Staying means you keep a low assessed value that a new buyer would never get, and in this state that protection is worth a great deal of money over time. I genuinely do not know which one is right for you, but tell me what you would do, and if this has already happened behind your house, tell us what it did to the value, because that is the number none of us can look up. Now the thing almost nobody mentions, and I would not have covered it if a viewer had not raised it under that video. The comment pointed out that all of this is happening on top of a water problem. Florida is a peninsula sitting on porous limestone. The fresh water comes from aquifers underneath it, and pulling more and more of that water out for more and more rooftops draws salt water in behind it. I did not take that on trust, so I checked it with the United States Geological Survey, and it holds up. The survey states plainly that Florida is one part of the country that has dealt with saltwater intrusion, that it has happened through several compounding causes, including fresh groundwater levels falling relative to the sea, and that excessive groundwater pumping is one of the factors that drives seawater into fresh supplies. So the thing under the sprawl is not traffic, it is water. And unlike traffic, you cannot widen it. I am not going to overclaim here, because I am a real estate man and not a hydrologist, and the timelines on this are long and argued over. What I will say is that when you are looking at a county, the question of where its drinking water comes from and how much of it is left is a question worth asking, and almost no buyer asks it. There is one more comment worth putting in front of you, because it is a forecast rather than a grievance, and a lot of people agreed with it. It says that the Tampa and Orlando areas are going to fuse into something bigger than Miami, and that the result will be an endless suburb on the scale of Los Angeles. Look at what is between those two cities on a map, and that is not a wild claim. It is one interstate with development creeping toward the middle from both ends, and the middle is shrinking every year. Now, the state has not ignored that road. The big rebuild through Orlando ran past $2 billion and took the better part of a decade, and traffic on it passed the projections the engineers had written before the work was even finished. On the worst stretches of that corridor, drivers are losing something like 74 hours a year sitting still, which is most of a working fortnight every year permanently. I want you to sit with what that means, because it is the closest thing to a law in this subject. You cannot widen your way out of it. A wider road does not reduce the traffic, it raises the number of houses that can be built along it, and the houses fill the road back up. Every dollar of that rebuild bought capacity that was spent almost immediately on more rooftops. So if you are looking at a county because a big road project has just been announced, understand what you are actually buying. You are not buying a shorter commute. You are buying a place that is about to be built on much harder than it is today. Which brings me to the part you actually came for. Where is it not like this? Because it is not everywhere, and the map of Florida people carry in their heads is badly out of date. The growth is overwhelmingly along the two coasts and through the middle corridor between the two big central metros. The Panhandle is a different state in almost every way that matters. So is a wide band of inland counties in the north and the center that the boom has walked straight past. I am not going to name 10 towns and send 1,000 people to each one, because I have watched that happen, and it is not a favor to anybody living there. What I will tell you is how to find them yourself, and it is 3 checks. Look at the county's population trend over the last 10 years, rather than the last one. Look at the number of residential building permits issued last year against the number of existing homes, because that ratio tells you what is coming, far better than any price chart. And drive the county road rather than the interstate on a weekday, because the interstate was built to make every place look like every other place. So what does the answer look like? If the permits are a small fraction of the housing stock, and the trend is flat, you have found a place that is not next. If the permits are running at several percent of the stock, you have found a place that already is, whatever the price looks like today. And do the drive properly. Go on a Tuesday, not a Sunday, because Sunday tells you nothing about a school run or a commute. Look for the tells that a county is about to turn, and they are always the same 3. A new interchange going in where there was a junction. Utility trunk lines being laid along a road with nothing on it yet, which is the surest sign of all, because nobody funds a pipe to serve cows. And a rezoning notice stapled to a post at the edge of a field, which is a thing almost every county is legally obliged to put up, and almost nobody stops to read. Remember that those 3 signs run about 2 to 5 years ahead of the houses. By the time the model home is open, the decision was made a long while back, at a meeting that was on the calendar and was open to you. Let me tell you where the full version of this work lives, because a few rules in a video is not a file. I keep a county-by-county assessment current, called the Florida Buy and Avoid list. 25 places I would buy in right now, 18 I would avoid, and 7 I am watching because they are moving. Every entry carries the typical value, the tax picture, the insurance reality, and the growth pressure, with the source written beside each number so you can check me on it. You will find it linked underneath this video. 2 honest cautions before you act on any of it. The first is that low growth is not automatically good. But a county with no permits and a falling population may be quiet because nothing is happening there at all, and that has its own consequences for what your house is worth when you need to sell it and whether the hospital is still open. Quiet and dying look identical on a chart and completely different in person, which is why the 3rd check is to drive it. And there is a short way to tell them apart once you are standing there. Look at the school and look at the grocery store. A county that is simply quiet still has a full car park at the school gate at 2:30, and a supermarket rather than a petrol station selling the week's food. A county that is emptying has a school with wings closed off and 40 minutes between you and a fresh vegetable. The population line on the chart is the same in both cases. The car park is not. And the second is that everything I have described is a trend rather than a prophecy. Florida has been declared full before. It was said in the 70s, and it was said again after 2008, and both times the people who sold and left watched from somewhere else while it carried on. So which is it? Somebody watching this has lived through one of those cycles and thinks I am being too gloomy or nowhere near gloomy enough. That is the comment I read first, and it is worth more than anything I said today. If you are new here, I am Roy Baker, and I go through Florida like this every week with the counties named and the sources named. Next week I am doing the counterweight to this one. The inland counties where the growth has not arrived and what you give up to live in them, because I have been promising that list for a while, and this is the video that earns it. And one last thing about that correction, because it is the whole point of today. The person who wrote it was not trying to be clever. They live here. Nobody who lives here needs an explanation of Florida filling up. They looked at a video calling this place a city, and they knew from their own windscreen that a city is not what is being built. What is being built is a suburb with no edges. That is the important word, and the difference between those 2 words is the difference between your house sitting at the center of something and your house sitting in the middle of it. If this was useful, subscribe, and I will see you next week.